Pretty much predictable. The Los Angeles Times just a few days ago came out with an editorial basically slamming the national media for its liberal bias once again. Now, this coming from the Los Angeles Times is pretty curious, to say the least. Coming from a newspaper who has, let me just go into it a little bit. Basically, what they were saying in this editorial was that journalists and reporters are essentially contributing their money towards Democratic campaigns and towards Democratic candidates. What they forgot to mention, perhaps, is that reporters and journalists, as far as the LA Times is concerned, aren't exactly very important people in that newspaper establishment to begin with. This is a paper who has cut their journalists and news departments back by essentially 50% in favor of let us call it corporate advertising. And so, the reporters and journalists who are making contributions to Democratic candidates are wholly, they're not holding any sway with that particular newspaper, or for that matter, with many others. It's essentially laughable to even make that argument, since our corporate-owned news media are exactly that. They are corporate-owned, and they are going to follow the interest of the corporate elite. You can see it every day, basically. So it was refreshing to see a little article by The Guardian over at UK. It comes from across the Atlantic, so to speak, which debunks some things in terms of the McCain campaign. You probably won't hear this too much here. Probably you will, but it's not going to be played out too much. So let me read you a couple of excerpts from this. The article was entitled "Terrorists for Obama." Earlier this week, and this is an article by Cliff Schechter. I'll post a link to it as soon as I find it over here. Earlier this week, Republican presidential nominee John McCain dipped into the old GOP bag of tricks and essentially called Democratic candidate Barack Obama a traitor. On Tuesday, at a town hall meeting in New Hampshire, McCain claimed he was different from his opponent because Obama would rather lose the war than the election. That's right. Obama's super secret plan is to win over the voters in the Midwest by serving up American troops in the Middle East. It's pure political genius. But the real punchline to this absurd claim is that McCain, whose campaign has constantly slandered Obama with scurrilous charges so voters might question whether he has America's best interest in mind, actually had the gall to charge the Illinois senator with politicizing national security. I mean, really, if anybody hasn't figured out by now that anything in this election dealing with national security hasn't become politicized on both sides of the aisle, maybe you should be paying some more attention to it. So, can someone please enlighten McCain as to the definition of the word irony? For this McCain ripping a page from the playbook of his bosom buddy President Bush, who has thought since the beginning of the general election to use a combination of recess-level rhetoric and a constant stream of distortions to turn every aspect of American foreign policy into a campaign prop. regardless of how it affects the safety of Americans in the Middle East and throughout the remainder of the globe. In late April, utilizing McCain's own flapping gums, during what must have been a riveting conference call with conservative bloggers, the McCain camp made the outlandish charge that it's very clear who Hamas wants to be the next president of the United States. Terrorists for Obama. Or so we are to believe. Did the McCain campaign think about how a charge like this might actually affect U.S. policy with Israel, the Palestinians, or the rest of the world should Obama actually become president? One assumes not, or at least not until long after they take a look at the electoral map in the United States. And someone might ponder where such slander might benefit them making the slander towards certain interest groups. But not content to stop there, Deputy Campaign Manager Christian Ferry sent out an email at the same time entitled Hamas Weighs In on U.S. Presidential Election. The missive contained such nuggets of wisdom as, we need a change in America, but not the kind of change that wins kind words from Hamas, surrenders in Iraq, and will hold unconditional talks with Iranian President Ahmadinejad. The trifecta. McCain more recently decided he was not satisfied with simply politicizing our foreign policy in the Middle East, so his handlers decided to take a page out of the Cold War playbook. This time they used a long-time GOP tactic, placing Obama side by side with long-time Cuban personality Fidel Castro in a web ad. How might this affect our relationship, or lack thereof, with Cuba or numerous parts of Latin America where Castro is viewed in a much different light? Who cares? They have South Floridian geriatric Cuban voters to try and scare into voting for McCain. Duplicity is but a necessity. The British novelist and poet Somerset Maugham once said, hypocrisy is the most difficult and nerve-wracking vice that any man can pursue. It needs an unceasing vigilance and a rare detachment of spirit. It cannot, like adultery or gluttony, be practiced at spare moments. It is a whole-time job. Luckily for McCain, he seems to have a lot of time on his hands. I'll make another video concerning Obama and McCain and all this campaign rhetoric pretty soon. Thanks for listening.